The fluorescent lights of the call center flickered overhead as I finished my late shift. My name is Maya Rodriguez, 26, a first-generation college graduate who'd clawed her way up from a cramped apartment in the wrong side of town to become a top-performing strategic communications specialist. Every paycheck was a testament to years of relentless hard work, midnight study sessions, and sacrifices my immigrant parents had made. Daniel Harrison was different from anyone I'd ever dated. Tall, with carefully tousled hair, and the kind of confidence that came from generations of inherited wealth, he seemed like he'd stepped out of a magazine. When we first met at a professional networking event, I was struck by his genuine interest in my work, his eyes lighting up as I discussed a complex communications strategy for a nonprofit. Our relationship had been a delicate dance of two worlds. Daniel's family lived in a sprawling suburban mansion, a world away from the modest duplex where I grew up. His parents, Richard Harrison, a prominent investment banker, and Elizabeth, a society philanthropist, represented old money, the kind that whispered judgment in polite tones and maintained appearances with surgical precision. I'd tried to fit in, carefully selected outfits from my most expensive work wardrobe, researched dinner conversation topics, practiced the subtle art of blending in. Daniel assured me his family would love me, that my achievements and determination were what mattered. "They're not like that," he'd say, dismissing my anxieties with a reassuring kiss. The dinner invitation came after 2 years of dating. "A formal family dinner," Daniel had said, his tone a mixture of excitement and mild apprehension. I'd spent weeks preparing, researching his family's charitable foundations, understanding their social circles, selecting a dress that walked the line between professional and elegant. Little did I know that one evening would become a pivotal moment that would change everything. As I sat in my tiny apartment, reviewing my notes for the upcoming dinner, I had no idea how dramatically my life was about to shift. The neatly pressed blazer hung ready, my heels polished to perfection. I was Maya Rodriguez, prepared, resilient, and determined to prove my worth. I didn't realize then that worth wasn't something you could prove to those who had already decided your value. The Harrison dining room was a tableau of understated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light on silver candelabras, antique china gleamed, and the tension was palpable from the moment I stepped inside. Richard Harrison sat at the head of the table, his steel-gray eyes appraising me like a specimen under a microscope. Elizabeth offered a tight smile that never reached her eyes. Daniel attempted small talk, his voice slightly higher than usual, a telltale sign of his own nervousness. I'd rehearsed my introduction meticulously. My work in strategic communications for emerging nonprofits, my recent successful campaign that had secured significant funding for urban education initiatives. I was ready to demonstrate my value. But Richard Harrison had other plans. Midway through the main course, as I was explaining a recent project, he interrupted. The words came like a precisely aimed dagger. "Street garbage like you doesn't belong at this table. Daniel, you can't seriously think this girl could ever understand our world." The room went silent. Elizabeth's hand froze mid-gesture with her wine glass. Daniel's face drained of color. I felt the heat rising, not from embarrassment, but from a slow-burning fury that had been accumulating through years of subtle dismissals and coded language. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice calm and clear. Richard leaned back, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "You heard me. Your background, your circumstances. You're out of your depth here." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend me. But he said nothing. The silence was deafening. In that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person who had been told they didn't belong, who had been systematically marginalized and dismissed. My hands were steady as I placed my fork down. Richard Harrison had no idea what was coming. The drive home was a blur of emotions. Daniel's weak attempts at explanation only fueled my growing resolve. "My father can be difficult," he mumbled. "He doesn't mean—" I cut him off. He meant exactly what he said. Researching the Harrison family became my mission. What I discovered was a carefully constructed facade of philanthropy masking generations of systemic exclusion. Richard's investment firm had a history of predatory practices targeting minority communities. Elizabeth's charitable foundations consistently underfunded urban and immigrant-led initiatives. Their public image was meticulously crafted, respectable, generous, pillars of the community. But beneath that veneer lay a calculated system of oppression. Daniel's silence spoke volumes. He knew. He had always known. I recalled moments from our relationship, subtle comments, his discomfort when discussing my family's struggles, his careful avoidance of my neighborhood. The pattern became crystal clear. I wasn't a partner to him. I was a project, a potential transformation he could showcase. My professional network became my greatest asset. As a strategic communications specialist, I understood the power of information, reputation, and strategic exposure. I began collecting evidence, not just about Richard, but about the entire system of privilege that allowed such casual cruelty to persist. Financial documents, email chains, recorded conversations, each piece a potential weapon. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. My mentor, Rosa Martinez, a legendary communications strategist who had fought similar battles, listened carefully as I outlined my discoveries. "Be methodical," she advised. "True justice isn't revenge, it's systemic accountability." Her words became my blueprint. I would not just respond to Richard's attack, I would expose the carefully constructed mythology of the Harrison family's supposed meritocracy. The plan began to take shape. Each piece of information was a puzzle, and I was about to reveal the entire picture. My approach would be surgical. Richard Harrison believed in appearances, in maintaining a pristine public image. That would be his downfall. I assembled a team of trusted colleagues, each an expert in a different domain. Elena, a forensic accountant, Marcus, an investigative journalist, Raj, a digital forensic specialist. We met in my apartment, whiteboards covered with interconnected information. The Harrison family's philanthropic facade would become their greatest vulnerability. Their charitable foundation operated like a carefully constructed shell game, moving money in ways that looked legitimate but were fundamentally problematic. Elena's financial analysis revealed multiple instances of potential tax fraud. Not blatant enough to trigger immediate legal action, but sufficient to create significant reputational damage. Offshore accounts, questionable fund transfers, strategic accounting that skirted legal boundaries. Marcus discovered a pattern of suppressed stories, local businesses destroyed by Richard's investment strategies, community initiatives undermined by calculated financial maneuvers. Raj uncovered digital trails that told a story of systematic manipulation. Emails, deleted communications, carefully curated digital footprints that hinted at a much darker operational model. My role was integration and strategy. I would create a narrative that was factual, compelling, and impossible to ignore. The plan had multiple layers. A meticulously documented report to relevant regulatory bodies. Strategic media placements highlighting the Foundation's questionable practices. Targeted outreach to investigative journalists. Careful documentation of every single claim Daniel was irrelevant now. This was bigger than our relationship. Rosa's guidance echoed in my mind. Make them see the system, not just the individual. Each piece of information was vetted, cross-referenced, confirmed. We weren't looking to destroy, we were looking to expose and transform. The Harrison family believed they were untouchable. They were about to learn a fundamental truth. No system of privilege is permanent. Every facade has its fracture points. I reviewed our strategy one final time. Everything was prepared. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. A carefully crafted press release, backed by comprehensive documentation, landed simultaneously with regulatory reports. The language was clinical, professional, each statement a precise scalpel cutting through the Harrison family's carefully constructed narrative. The initial story broke in 3 major financial publications. Headline: Harrison Foundation, Philanthropy or Systematic Exclusion. Within hours, the digital ecosystem erupted. Social media amplified the narrative. Every claim was supported by documentation, every statement meticulously sourced. Marcus's journalist contacts provided additional depth. They weren't just reporting, they were conducting deep investigative pieces that revealed systemic patterns of exclusion and manipulation. Richard's first response was predictable: aggressive legal threats. But our documentation was ironclad. Each potential lawsuit would only draw more attention to the underlying issues. The Harrison Foundation's board began to fracture. Board members distanced themselves, requesting emergency meetings. Richard's carefully cultivated network of influential connections started to retreat. Elena's financial analysis revealed how the foundation had systematically undermined minority-led initiatives while presenting a facade of charitable work. Tax records showed a pattern of strategic fund allocation that effectively neutralized potential community growth. Raj's digital forensics uncovered communication trails that demonstrated deliberate systemic marginalization. Deleted emails, strategically parsed communications that revealed underlying biases. I wasn't seeking personal vengeance. This was about systemic accountability. News networks picked up the story. Panel discussions emerged about generational privilege, about the subtle mechanisms of institutional exclusion. The Harrison name became synonymous with systemic inequality. Richard's professional networks began to crumble. Speaking engagements were canceled. Board positions became untenable. The carefully constructed mythology of the Harrison family's philanthropic leadership collapsed. Daniel attempted to contact me multiple times. I didn't respond. My parents watched the unfolding narrative with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Mija," my mother said, "you've done something remarkable." The goal was never destruction. It was transformation. By exposing the systemic issues, we created space for genuine dialogue about equity, about true philanthropic leadership. The fallout was immediate and comprehensive. Richard Harrison's legal team launched multiple counterattacks, but each attempt only further exposed the underlying systemic issues. Every legal maneuver became another opportunity to reveal the broader narrative of institutional exclusion. Daniel's position became increasingly complicated. His family's network disintegrated, and he found himself professionally isolated. The golden boy of a once powerful family was now witnessing the systematic dismantling of everything he'd known. Media coverage evolved from initial shock to deeper investigative pieces. Academics began analyzing the Harrison case as a critical study of institutional privilege. University lectures, policy discussions, systemic inequality frameworks all referenced our exposure. Elizabeth Harrison attempted damage control, giving carefully staged interviews. But each appearance only further unraveled their carefully constructed narrative. Her attempts to portray the family as misunderstood philanthropists rang hollow. The professional consequences multiplied. Richard's investment firm saw major clients withdrawing. Board positions evaporated. The network that had protected them for generations was systematically dismantled. Daniel reached out one final time, a desperate email pleading for understanding. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. The final confrontation happened unexpectedly. At a public conference on social equity, Richard Harrison attempted to salvage his reputation by giving a keynote speech about community engagement. I was in the audience. When the Q&A session began, I raised my hand. The room went silent as I walked to the microphone, my movements deliberate, my composure absolute. "Mr. Harrison," I began, my voice clear and controlled, "your foundation has systematically marginalized the very communities you claim to support. Here's comprehensive documentation proving how your philanthropic efforts have been nothing more than an elaborate performance of social responsibility." I presented the meticulously prepared dossier, each page a testament to years of calculated exclusion, bank records, email chains, suppressed reports, a complete narrative of systemic manipulation. The audience watched, transfixed. Journalists furiously took notes. Digital cameras captured every moment. Richard's face transformed, from confidence to confusion, then to a desperate attempt to maintain composure. But the evidence was irrefutable. "You called me street garbage once," I said, my final statement cutting through the stunned silence. "Today, I'm showing exactly who the real garbage is." The room erupted, some in shock, some in applause, but all bearing witness to a moment of profound reckoning. In the months following the public confrontation, my life transformed dramatically. The exposure of the Harrison family's systemic misconduct became a catalyst for broader conversations about privilege, accountability, and social justice. I received numerous speaking invitations, job offers from progressive organizations, and recognition from civil rights groups. But the true victory wasn't personal accolades, it was the systemic change we'd initiated. The Harrison Foundation was dismantled. Regulatory investigations led to significant reforms in philanthropic oversight. Daniel disappeared from public view, a casualty of his family's exposed legacy. Rosa Martinez pulled me aside one evening. "You didn't just expose a family," she said. "You created a blueprint for accountability." My parents watched with a mixture of pride and amazement. The daughter they'd sacrificed everything for had not just survived, she transformed a narrative of oppression into a powerful statement of resistance. The street garbage had become the architect of change. I learned that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about creating space for justice, for understanding, for genuine transformation. Every system of privilege has its breaking point, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to expose the truth. My definition of success had changed. It was no longer about fitting into someone else's world, but about creating a world where no one would be made to feel less than human. The dinner that was meant to humiliate me became the moment that defined my path. Richard Harrison thought he was putting me in my place. Instead, he gave me the most powerful platform of my life.